Okay. let- Just give me a thumbs up.
Did that work?
No.
Not yet, but I think it's my laptop.
So, yeah, capital A Attleboro, 100, capital R Rathbone. That is the one that I used last week. Or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was.
Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and welcome to the Attleboro School Committee meeting of Monday, August 17th, 2020. This is your reminder that this meeting is being electronically recorded. To start things off, we have a couple of exciting introductions tonight. And for that, I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Regan.
Thank you, Chairman Withers. First, I'd like to introduce Miss Brenda Swintek. She's our new K12 Humanities Coordinator. I'd like to thank the screening committee that participated in helping to select Brenda. And then I also wanted to share with you that many of you know her already. She is, or formerly was, the literacy coach at Willett Elementary School and also the head teacher. Last year, she took on the position as well as a K12 Humanities Coordinator, as well as holding on to her position at Willett, and supported the curriculum, the ELA curriculum pilot. And so she was instrumental in helping us select the curriculum that we're going to be rolling out for this school year. And she also has been an integral member of supporting the reopening plans and the development of each model. So without further ado, I would like to say that we are absolutely thrilled to have Brenda as part of our team, and we're happy to have her with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you to the committee. I'm thrilled to be in this new position in Attleboro, serving in this new capacity. My involvement in the curriculum review process was an important aspect of my job as a coach, and I'm very excited to continue this work, especially in these crazy times where I think we could use some stability and some prior knowledge to the position. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Swintek. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I would just say as a Willett parent, the last 6 or 7 years, I know the important role you played in that school, and you'll certainly be missed there. But as a district as a whole, we're lucky to have you in this position. So I wish you all the best of luck, and look forward to working with you more going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Withers.
Thank you, Brenda.
Congratulations.
Next, I'd like to introduce Ms. Sarah Angelowski. She is our family engagement specialist. And again, I'd like to thank the screening committee that participated in helping to select Sarah. She has the very daunting task of taking on a brand new role in the middle of a reopening of a school district in a situation that we've never experienced before. So she has certainly hit the ground running and has already been meeting with many of our community partners. And she has participated in our Neighbors in Dialogue discussion with the Attleboro Public Library and Be Heard. And we are thrilled to have her on board with us as well. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Regan. I'm excited to be here in the time that I'm here, and I've spent the past few weeks really getting to reach out to community members and district members and really getting a sense of all of the resources and supports that are provided to our families. And I've gotten to sit on some very important and relevant meetings and discussions. And with that being said, I'm very excited to move forward. Thank you all for having me here, and I look forward to what may come.
Thank you. Any questions for Sarah? Mr. Dominici?
Not so much a question. I mean, welcome, Sarah. Thank you. And I can't imagine for what you are signing on to do a more challenging time to try and do it. So obviously, if there's ways that we can support you, please feel free to reach out. I think, we've always talked about our outreach to our community and to families, and it's great to see that we're able to take a step forward in that process, while trying to navigate exactly how to expand that outreach during times where we're not really supposed to have too much outreach personally. So a lot of challenges indeed for you. Welcome aboard and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Geddes?
Sarah, congratulations and welcome to Attleboro. I will echo Ms. Regan and Mr. Dominici. This is not an enviable time to be coming into this position, but it is an exceptionally important position. It's one that we have been advocating for a number of years. It is an entire, it is a very significant portion of the district's mission and vision over the next few years. So I'm excited that we were finally able to get someone in this position, and we're looking forward to what you can bring. So that's my comment, but if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about yourself, your work history, and where you have been previously.
Yeah, of course. I'm from Attleboro. I spent most of my life here. I went through the school system. I'm an AHS alumni. And after I graduating university, I moved to North Macedonia. And I was lucky enough to teach kindergarten and first grade there in an international school, which was great because I got to interact with many different cultures and families, and I got to understand the vast spectrum of values and relationships between families and schools. And that's really helped me to understand the important role that school plays in family, as well as in the community, and how we can utilize all of those things together. And I just moved back to Attleboro in December with my family. I was at Studley as an ELL paraprofessional for a few months, and then I just recently transitioned over to this position.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Larson?
Sarah, welcome.
Thank you.
And it's great to see you back in Attleboro. And if there's anything we can do to help, because it's a very important position, just let us know. We'll do what we can to give you as much help as we can.
Thank you. I appreciate all of your support.
Thank you, Sarah. Good luck. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you. You as well.
So those are our two exciting introductions today. Moving on in our agenda, we have our report of the superintendent. And for that, I'll turn it over to the superintendent, Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Chairman Withers. I wanted to start by addressing an issue that emerged last week as we work through the various questions that have been raised by, how we're going to prepare for the start of school. Two themes really emerged in the work last week. One were coming from parents and families, the continued expression of concerns about what remote learning will look like. And I know Ms. Regan is going to speak a little bit about that in relation to the ABA during her report, but just sort of a general concern that, people, the memories of the spring are still fresh, and a lot of parents have a lot of questions about how this will be in relation to that. And so related to that, another theme that emerged was that, I think many educators were concerned about exactly, how a discussion about those concerns has transpired. And so I just wanted to take a brief moment to acknowledge that, I probably should have done a better job of framing this issue for everyone. We've talked pretty extensively about how last spring was a crisis, and that we were managing a crisis, and we are very appreciative of how many people in the district went above and beyond what anyone could expect of them under those conditions to do the best that we could. And I have said on multiple occasions, I am proud of what we were able to pull together, given that we had no preparation for it coming, and as an institution are just not set up to operate in the way that we had to this spring. That said, we're all well aware that we did not deliver the same quality of educational experience as a result of what we were up against. That goes without saying, and I don't think anyone is to blame for that. And We also know that there was a real range in the quality of the experiences that families experience. And again, I don't think that there's any reason to turn that into any sort of individual commentary. Everyone did what they could, and I think different people were in different situations and had different capacities. There was a lot going into what we were able to do at that time. And so moving forward, the message that I wanted to share with the community and the committee, obviously, is that, no one, and I mean no one, wants to replicate our experience last spring, not the least of which is the educators themselves, who did not enjoy it any more than the families did, and are as equally frustrated at their inability to do what they do so well under different circumstances. And so, I haven't, I guess, done a good enough job to being explicit about that. And I just wanted to take a moment to let the community know that everyone is committed to this fall being very, very different. And we're working hard through our work both in and out of negotiations with the AEA to make sure that teachers have what they need so that they can be successful, so that they can support students and families, so that this fall is going to be a different experience than what we had last spring.
Yeah, the only thing I would disagree with is I certainly wouldn't put the blame on yourself, Superintendent Sawyer. I think, my time on the school committee, I think we've been clear as much as we can, how lucky we are in Attleboro for the educators we have, how much we support the teachers, and have worked hard to show that and to come to real results, because that's a real benefit that we have here in Attleboro. And so, to the extent that, the discussion 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago, didn't reflect that, I think it was, a mistake on all our parts, and certainly not intentional. I think you hit on a key point, which is that, last spring, no one wants a repeat of that. No one wants a repeat of that, but everyone also recognizes that everyone did their best last spring and made the best of a really, really bad situation. Parents and educators, I think, have a concern to how is it going to be different from the spring. And I think that's what at least I was trying to get at, and I think the committee was trying to get at, because I know families don't want a repeat of that. And as you said, I know teachers don't want a repeat of that, because that was crisis management as opposed to education. So agree 100% that was not that was certainly not any sort of message that we're trying to get across, because I think this committee, as a whole, has been very supportive of our teachers for very, very strong, very, very good reasons, and that we know that we accomplish more with less as a result of their hard work. So thank you. Anyone else? Scott? Oh, you're taking your mask off. No.
Well, I am. I didn't know if, Dave, I didn't know if you had more to report.
Yes, that was just item number one.
Okay, because I'll probably have a couple of questions, but yeah, I was just getting ready.
All right, so you're just gearing up over there?
A little bit.
Getting ready? Anyone else on that? No?
Okay. So at this point, I'd like to shift into, I think, the meatiest development since we last were together, which is that the state has identified a metric by which school districts are supposed to consider their decisions around what mode of instruction to deliver given any set of circumstances. So as I distributed to the committee, we now have a rating system. I think a lot of people saw it in the paper. It's color coded. White means that there's so little data that they don't bother to report it. Green means should be in person from the state's perspective. Yellow means that would make sense to do as a hybrid. And red is when they claim we should be in remote. And they set that threshold using a metric that I think we were a little bit surprised by. There's been a lot of talk of the World Health Organization setting of a 5% positivity rate. I know that New York took a bold stand and instituted a 3% positivity rate. And of course, positivity rate is a measure of with any 14-day period, how many of the total tests given are coming back positive. So it's a function, it's a number that is affected by whether or not you're doing a lot of tests or not. So I think that's part of why in Massachusetts, The governor chose not to go with that, although he explicitly in the guidance from, well, he didn't, the commissioner in his guidance that he sent out that I shared with you said that we should consider positivity rates, right? That is an important metric for us to consider. But the one that he went with is average daily cases. So per 100,000. So you take, how many cases you had over 14 days, you divide that number by 14 to give you how many cases you had by per day, and then you take that number and then you have to convert that to per 100,000. So based on the data that the state has published, they have our population in Attleboro at just over 46,000. It's 46,000 and change, which I believe gives you a rate that you have to convert to of like 2.16 change. So fundamentally, however many cases per day in Attleboro over a 14-day period, you take that number and you multiply it by just a little bit more than 2 to get you to what that number looks like per 100,000. And then if that number is above 8, we're supposed to go to remote, according to the experts, and below 8, we should be in hybrid. And if we're far below 8, we should be in a remote in accordance with the guidance from the state. So I did have some charts I wanted to go over. The first one, I just wanted to answer the question, where is this data that these charts are made from coming from? And the answer is from the state itself. So it's from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health's COVID-19 dashboard. They call this report the weekly COVID-19 public health report. You all received the link to this in that email that I shared with you. I know no one can read those numbers, but that's the page that Attleboro is on. You'll notice that the left column is the towns, and then there's total cases, the total cases over the last 14 days, what that turns into a rate, and then there's more data with positivity being somewhere over on the right-hand side. So the source is the Department of Health, which, by the way, any other source one might use, they're just taking the Department of Health's data, right? That's the only person, as far as I know, that has accurate data on cases in Massachusetts. And they do publish this report on a weekly basis on Wednesdays. So we'll be looking at our data again on Wednesday and updating all this information. I will be sending that all out to you. And I will continue to do that. And I will publicly publish that as well moving forward as we as a community watch these numbers and think about what they mean for us. So this first chart was just a page out of that report, which is a weekly report. I should point out a couple things. One, that report has evolved over time. So if you go back in April, the report had like 2 columns, not as many columns as you saw tonight. As the effort to track these things and make good decisions around the data, they have evolved. And so, one of the things the positivity rate, they didn't start reporting that until July 8th, right? So, some of these numbers don't go back all the way, but they're all tied to the weekly case count, which is a number that has been available, and you can look up all the way back to the very start. The first report was on April 14th, and at that time, Attleboro had 210 cases. And then there's been a weekly report since April 14th, and the number has steadily grown to 711, which is what was in the August 12th report. So that's where the data is coming from. So this first chart is to just give us the broad picture of where we've been. Now, the state started reporting an official 14-day case count as of July 22nd. This goes all the way back to April 14th. So where did I get the numbers if they didn't start officially reporting it? The answer to that is we took the number of cases from week to week, because they did report that through this whole thing, and then just used that to calculate what the average was during that period. I shared these charts with our local health department, and to make, because anytime you're talking about statistics, right? I think we all understand that in in adept hands, statistics can be used to tell all kinds of different stories. And so I just want you all to know and the public to know that I don't have an agenda. The district doesn't have an agenda in trying to tell a particular story. We want to try to capture what the reality is as best we can. And so in sharing that data with the health department, I asked, does this match your perception of what's been happening, what's happened? Is this an accurate portrayal of what we went through? And the answer to that question was very much yes. So in that first chart, you'll notice that in April, we have that giant spike, and we are basically dealing with rates well above the remote threshold that we've just established that now. We didn't have that threshold then, but I think a really important part of the story in this chart is that looking back on it, we absolutely needed to shut down the schools and operate remotely through the spring, right? We didn't drop below that threshold until into June. And given how little we knew at that time and how high that number still remained through June, I would argue that there was cause for staying through all the way to the end. But it does help to explain why, when we got to June, we started to open up some of the restrictions and started behaving a little bit differently, because at that point, the number had fallen down to a level that's much more manageable. But through the spring, as this chart captures, we were really dealing with numbers well above what we're now pretty sure is a level of safety. And then that line, you'll notice after we get through June, is pretty steady straight through July, and then you start to see a little bit of an uptick in August. So let's zoom more in on the most recent data, and that data is reflecting numbers that have been reported for this purpose. And so I've added the thresholds. The red line at the top is the 8, right? Where that's the ceiling for being able to safely do hybrid. And beyond that, we should be in remote according to the state. And then yellow is the line at which we should be considering going to hybrid from in person according to the state. So you'll notice that through July, we were pretty steady. And then we've seen an uptick since the end of July going into last week. And we'll be very curious to see what the numbers look like this week, because obviously a trend there would be something we'd be concerned about. Now, a couple points I wanted to add. In my conversation with our local Department of Health, one, they pointed out to me that the data that the state's reporting is very fluid. So in 1 week, they'll report a number, and then they'll find out that someone who was tested in Attleboro actually was from Pennsylvania and happened to get the test in Attleboro, but was really in Pennsylvania. And so that case will then disappear later and be transferred to Pennsylvania's numbers, right? And so the number in any one point in time only reflects what's true in that moment, and that there are revisions to the data as time goes on. And so my attempt to make some of the numbers make sense to me, when I tried to have the experts explain to me why I couldn't make the numbers match up, they pointed out to me that part of the problem is that the numbers change. So you're not really dealing with apples to apples from week to week. Now the changes are 1 or 2 people, so it's minor differences, which is what I was experiencing. But I'm sure, like yourselves, if I get out the pencil and try to make the numbers work, I want it to be exact. And when I couldn't do that, I was very concerned, and that's why I reached out to help to understand that. Another interesting thing about that last graph we were looking at is that when I showed that to them and said, "Does this look right to you?" They replied to me, "No, that wasn't quite matching what they were experiencing." And they checked a different way of looking at this, and the way they were looking at it is that in the first 2 weeks of August, they actually think they've seen a decrease in the number of cases than what we saw in July. And I tried to understand, why that's the case, because they did say that the numbers that we're taking from the state, are the state's numbers, and they did say that those were accurate. And then we got into a discussion about how different tests have different accuracies, and that in fact, what they've seen is that which test is being used in Attleboro has flip-flopped from July to August, and that what they saw is that some of what we're seeing in this chart reflects the more successful test, the more stringent test, actually being used more often now, and that it's not actually a case that the numbers are growing up that much. So when you put that together with the fact that things are moving around a bit, I think the safest thing to do is to understand that the farther you get away from these numbers, the more they have a chance to settle into what they actually are, and that it would be probably imprudent to overreact to the freshest numbers because those are the ones that are most likely to change a little bit. So the other thing I'll say about this this second graph that I created for everyone is that I think this helps to explain in part why we were recommended hybrid. We knew based on, we've been watching the numbers all along, and while we didn't have a metric that the state had agreed upon to use in this way, we did know that according to the reports that we were looking at, that the number had been ticking up locally. And, while we are not at the metric, of course, we didn't have these metrics at that time, we did know we were rising. And I would say that given that we haven't had any opportunity to, be in person yet and to practice our protocols, the fact that we were edging towards a higher number certainly is part of why we made the recommendation that we did.
Mr. Goodish, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So looking at the kind of comparing the first two graphs, it looked as though in the first graph we've gone about 10 weeks being well below the remote threshold. And then in the second graph, it looks like not only are we well below the remote threshold, but we've also been well below the hybrid threshold. So what you're saying in terms of the testing numbers taking a few weeks to really settle themselves in is it's possible that as of, with that second chart, it looks like July 8th is the first date you have on there. As of July 8th, we may have been showing 3.6 cases per 100,000. And since then, it has gone down because tests have been corrected. So it's possible that would happen again in the future.
So I think the way to think about it is that as these things sort out, we might have a precipitous drop in this week's data to reflect evening out that 14 days based on what they were reporting at the department. Now, I don't want to they were not making that prediction.
Right.
They're not in the predicting business. That's not what they do. But if I understood the message I was receiving from them about how the numbers fluctuate and the fact that they think that we've actually had a slight reduction in cases in August over July, it would not surprise me if we saw that on Wednesday. Now, if we see the opposite, then I'm gonna have to go back to the drawing board to make sure I understand what's driving the numbers.
And is any consideration, because of the fluidity of the numbers, like you said, someone from out of state testing in Attleboro and accounting as an Attleboro test for a while, does number of patients at Sturdy factor into this at all to solidify numbers, to give us more confidence in the immediate ratio?
So they're reporting their numbers to the same place that all the testing sites are. So,
okay.
And by the way, they show up as where the person is from, not from Attleboro, right? So.
Right. I just didn't know, like you said, if someone is from another state, they test in Attleboro, that shows up and brings us up to 3.6.
It could be, yeah. If somebody, say from Pawtucket, comes to Sturdy, gets tested, that initially will show up, if they test positive, that could initially show up in our data. But when the state finally gets around to figuring out that needs to be transferred over to Rhode Island's numbers, and I guess there's some sort of protocol by which all that happens. They were talking about it in a way that, I didn't ask questions because luckily that's not my problem, nor theirs. But the point is that eventually that number disappears in Attleboro and shows up someplace else.
Right. I just didn't know if, as we're looking at that 3.6, we could say, yes, over the last 2 weeks, there's been an increase in positive tests in Attleboro.
Yeah.
But for example, Sturdy hasn't seen an increase in patients that are staying
Correct.
diagnosed with.
They are not.
Okay. Thank you.
To my knowledge. So then the final slide I have for you tonight is the positivity rate, which again, isn't the metric that the state used, but is one that is used in other places and the one that the commissioner and governor both say that we should be keeping an eye on. And I think that one of the things that we have to remember, and we've just sort of alluded to this, is that we are a border community, and we happen to border with a state who has a higher transmission rate currently than we do, and that has flip-flopped. So it's not a commentary on anything other than just what's true right now. So, as we pay attention to these things, we want to make sure that we're looking at multiple things, because we don't want the fact that, we know as we go back to school, a number of our faculty certainly live in Rhode Island and will be, have the exemption to come and work here under the current guidelines. We know, many of us, I think, heard the governor say that people could come and shop in Seekonk, and obviously Attleboro counts as that as well. Daily travelers from Rhode Island are part of the picture. And again, when we have school again, we do have families which are, split families, and we have kids who spend some of their time here in Attleboro and some of their places in other communities, and some of those happen to be over the border. So, we have to keep an eye on Rhode Island as well. But anyways, when we look at the positivity rate, that number, again, 5 is the red number at the top. That's what Johns Hopkins uses, and I believe they get that from the World Health Organization. And then I put in the orange for New York. I certainly get what New York State was doing when they picked that number, because when you're dealing with something like schools, you don't want to wait until you have a problem to make a decision. You want to get ahead of it. So their use of 3. So we're right along that line. That again, that's arbitrary that I included a 3% because that's got nothing to do with Massachusetts, but just as a sense of where we are in line with how other people think about it. So again, I think that helps to explain why, given the data, we thought that hybrid made a lot of sense, even though from a metric perspective, and again, that's set by the state, I cannot tell you that that's the right number or the safe number. I mean, I certainly have seen a lot of things that suggest why that they picked that, but given that that's what they've set, we're well below that, which I think would make some people argue that we should be in person. But I think there were some particular data points that really, I think, should cause us caution, especially considering we're starting. And then all along, I've said that we need to get kids into the building and try doing school under these very, very different conditions and get comfortable with our ability to do that before we take that next step. Because, baked into the assumptions about what's safe is our ability to operate under the restrictions, right? To have everyone follow the rules that are being set under the guidance. And, we already know that the guidance says, no less than 3 feet, but 6 wherever possible. With full in-person learning, we can't do 6 feet almost anywhere. Everything's going to be well below 6 feet. Now, we can get it in at 3 feet, but there's a big difference between 3 and 6. And so how do our protocols look? How well, what does passing times look like? I mean, we've all seen pictures of kids in hallways in the last couple of weeks. So for a lot of reasons, while the numbers bear out that, if we could do school in accordance with restrictions, we could be in person, we feel pretty strongly that the right way to start is in hybrid, so that it's safe and we can practice these things and get to a place where we can make a decision based on what the numbers look like at that time. So that's my brief review of this metric and how we will use it moving forward, and what it says about now. Are there any specifics about the numbers? Or
I mean, I guess we a week and a half ago made a decision to go hybrid across the board after, lengthy and vigorous debate. And there's certainly, there's no need to re-debate that or rediscuss that decision now. I do think it's important though, where this is a topic that I think everyone has strongly felt beliefs on this committee as parents, as educators. And, I think it came close between hybrid and remote. And I think that there was a feeling among some remote people or remote supporters that we were taking unnecessary risks. You look at this and it looks like, we certainly would have been justified in going in person, and, we're well below the hybrid threshold, at least from what I can see. So I certainly think that at least the numbers seem to back up what the administration supported. You would agree with that?
I am in agreement.
Anyone else? Mr. Dominici?
I do. And Dave, first off, thank you for a lot of things tonight. Thank you for even how you and your administration handled everything last spring. And thank you for bringing up what I think we all agree with. Maybe it wasn't as pronounced last meeting or not, but just how much we all value our educators and the work that they've done. We've talked for years about the funding gaps, and the reason that we haven't fallen off an edge with our education is because of the talent of our educators. So I appreciate you saying that. And, the metrics are good. I'm not obviously considering my vote last week. I don't necessarily agree because yes, I think that we are fortunate to be in Massachusetts. We have followed a lot of protocols where a lot of other areas of the country maybe have not. So our numbers are low because we've worked very hard to keep them low. And part of that has been, making the quick decision to keep children out of school. And it does concern me that in other areas, now granted, some of these areas I wouldn't exactly say they had much in terms of protocols. I don't think the virus cares about that stuff. We are starting to see a slight uptick. As much as the numbers could reduce, if somebody tests in Attleboro, other folks from Attleboro also go to places, they could be testing as well. So there could be the reciprocal numbers coming back. I think when all is said and done, it's probably going to, even out or average out about where we are, which is good. And I hope that we stay that way. The concerns, of course, that I have are, in order to know that our protocols are working, we have to have people in to make sure they work. And that's a scary factor for me when you're looking at, a virus like this. I have those concerns about practicing those protocols under those conditions. And I do have concerns that, we're still 4 weeks away from opening. So we don't know what those numbers are going to be. I don't think we meet again for another 3 weeks or so. So it's possible that we start to go beyond some thresholds and show some concerns. The numbers right now, and thank you for explaining where you got them. I was pretty certain. I did ask that question. I just wanted to confirm that, the numbers you had pulled were the numbers that I look at and probably everybody else here. So while right now, August 17th, it looks like we're in good standing, we still have a few weeks to go. I assume that we'll probably have a little bit more discussion tonight about where we are with these protocols, because I know that that's an ever evolving task, monumental, and I don't envy any of you for what has to be done. But if we're going to have a little bit more time to kind of go through where we are with that, I'll hold off on any other questions, because I do have some about the state of some of the buildings, some of the testing that we're doing. So if those things are going to be discussed at a later time, then I'll hold my question.
Yeah, I suspect that's next or one of the next items.
Yeah, and we're also going to have reports from all your central office administrators. So if you haven't heard it when, the right person's talking, I would certainly ask them.
Mr. Storrs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the update. I love data, so I'm glad that you actually provided this. Last meeting, it was more philosophical. It was the bigger picture. So I'm glad that we're actually looking at data. I think it supports the decision that we made, and it also supports the discussions that we had. So I think that's great. One question that I think would be good for both parents and staff, just generally. the staff are going to be back about about 14 days or so before students will be coming to the schools. Could you briefly discuss the plans that the staff will be experiencing over the course of those 14 days or so?
Is your question more about the sort of employee conditions they're going to be facing, or what they're going to be doing with their time?
Time-wise, effectively,
Yeah, so
how are we using that? Yes.
well, Ms. Regan can certainly address that.
Oh, it's you.
So we're actively putting all those plans together right now. The first 2 days pretty much will be focused on building procedures and health and safety guidelines. Those 2 days have been set aside for that. Our nurse coordinator, Deb Ebert, will be coming actually this Thursday to share the PowerPoint presentation and the information that she'll be sharing with all of the schools throughout the district on those 2 days. So our administrators will be able to ask questions and really dive into some of the details this week, and then help to prepare for the final presentations that'll happen in the buildings on those first 2 days. So that'll be the first 2 days. And then after that, it'll be really diving into what curriculum and instruction looks like in a hybrid mode, and what it looks like on a remote day, what it looks like on an in-person day, getting some technology training, looking more at the pedagogy that's behind using the Google Suite, and then getting some very explicit training in some of the digital subscriptions that we're purchasing. So a specific one that we're really advocating for is called Clever. That's a single sign-on, so that when students are signing into their Chromebook, they just have to use one username and one password, and then that's it. They'll be able to access all of the platforms that we have them available. So that's just one example, but there's many others too. So that's what those 2 weeks will be for. And then we're still working through some of the details out with our negotiation team. And so I'm sure there'll be more things that will be included in that.
Steve?
Yeah, Mr. Hill, go ahead.
Hi. Just to comment on Mr. Store's point, saying that data supports the decision. Not to rehash things, but I think it's important, Jim, as a data guy, you'll know that data is only as good as the theory upon which it rests. And all of this is based on theories, guidelines, models. So, we have made our decision through a process. I don't think we need to, I'm not sure if there's justification going on there or not, but just a reminder that all of this is based on a model. And, that's what we're going on. Time will tell if we were, if the model was correct or not. There's certainly different opinions about the model as well. So I would go to caution against saying this supports this, was the right decision, etc.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Mr. Hill, we should qualify the fact that it supports it within the model. It's supported by the data. The data supports the decision within that context, which I completely agree with the point you're making, that nobody really knows what's true. I've had to make that point on
Exactly.
many occasions.
And one other
Thanks.
thing I would say in response to a point that Mr. Dominici made regarding the fact that there is 4 weeks still approximately till school starts. I mean, I think one of the things we tried to make clear is that these are our plans as of now. And, if we see an unexpected or, a spike that we hoped we wouldn't see, and, we go from, 3 cases per 100,000 to 8 over the next couple of weeks. And we need to call a special meeting, and we'll certainly do that. These are our plans now based on situations on the ground and as of now, but we can't exactly predict the future, but we have to plan for the future. So we're planning based on what we know. And if we see a huge spike, we'll meet sooner than 3 weeks from tonight. But hopefully that's not the case.
Okay. So, I also wanted to update you that I had a discussion about all of this with Sturdy. They reached out and set up a meeting. I wasn't quite sure what we were talking about, but I always like our friends at Sturdy and was happy to make some time. And it became very clear to me very quickly that they were very concerned about what schools in general were doing, but certainly they wanted to learn more by talking about the Attleboro Public Schools. And we had a pretty extensive conversation about a lot of different issues. Again, I think on the whole, that conversation was validating. They liked the answers to the questions they had about how we were going to be conducting ourselves. They agreed to the idea that if we are successful in following the guidelines, if we deliver on these protocols and procedures the way that we need to, that under the current viral conditions in the community, as they are experiencing it every day, that our staff and students will be as safe as they will be going anywhere else in the community. Now, as we've talked about multiple times, and I keep saying it because it's just true. I mean, there's no doubt that remote is safer, right? If you not leaving the house is safer than leaving the house. That's true of any activity. And so whether it's to go to the grocery store or to play baseball or whatever the activity is, leaving the house is always going to be the safer choice. But Sturdy left me feeling like if we follow the basic guidelines under these current conditions, we're not going to be putting anybody at risk. That said, they made it very clear to me that they have limited capacity to deal with another outbreak, and that they are worried about how cold and flu season will make the next outbreak different than it was in the spring and be a drain on their capacity. And they were very worried about what the impact of an outbreak related to the schools would be if they were already under a strained condition. And when I explained to them the state's metric of 8 per 100,000, and I explained that if we were hovering at that number, we'd be going to remote and letting things cool down, they expressed great relief to hear that information. And it was, as someone who's not a healthcare professional, right? I don't deal with that side of things, obviously. It was a relief for me to hear them feel so relieved by how we're approaching this and the way the state is conducting itself and their perception of how things are. And I think the point that nobody really knows is absolutely true. And any part of this could be changed by new information at any moment. And we have to be ready to do that and be nimble and to rethink things that we thought were true. That's all baked into this. But I left that conversation with Sturdy feeling like we have a good plan, we have good metrics, and we just have to be ready and swift to act. And that's why anyone watching at home, you have to know that we're going hybrid. If the virus gets better and the conditions remain good, we can certainly talk about going back in person. But if it goes the other way, it starts to get worse, there's a real possibility we end up back in full remote as a way to combat that as a community, because the schools have to remember their role in the larger context. Because as Sturdy talked about, if their capacity to handle things gets overwhelmed, that doesn't just affect people who have COVID, right? If you have a medical event and you need attention, you're having a heart attack, you had a stroke, if they are overwhelmed by COVID, that's going to have an impact on your care. And that's why, we have to think about these things in a larger context, as we have. And I felt really good about where we've landed with all of these things based on that conversation.
Mr. Goodish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To your point, I think we do all agree that staying at home is the safest option, but that doesn't eliminate the possibility that there are safe ways to leave home. And in that regard, this is absolutely absolute community responsibility that kids have to be going to school with masks. They have to be washing hands regularly. And as much as the district and the administration are implementing practices and procedures and making facility changes to ensure that on the school side, we are expecting a lot from our parents, especially those that want hybrid or want in person, to understand that in order for us to get to that point and to get to a point of in person or to continue with hybrid, the students need to understand what their role in that is. Families need to understand what their role in that is. That it's not as easy as you have the sniffles, but you're still awake, go to school. It's rethinking and kind of going with the golden rule. You know, you don't want to be frustrated that your kid got sick because someone else was negligent in sending a sick kid to school. So you should be practicing the same type of caution for yourselves and for other families in the district. So just a quick comment there based on, kind of went along with your point. Thank you.
Yeah, just two other things that I thought of that I should mention. One, they did acknowledge the trend that there's more infections of children that we're seeing across the country, and that's a real trend. But I think what was interesting to me was that was not the point of concern for them. They said that if you have problems at these levels, it's going to be because you're relying on human beings to follow rules. And we all know what that looks like in the real world. And they said that from their perspective, based on trying to learn from other communities and what they've gone through, our biggest threat is the adults following the rules. And so, back to the training piece, we're going to work really hard. And, we've heard from the educators that they are very concerned. So we have to, work with their concern to help them to realize that these rules are important and we need to follow them, because that's where the real threat comes from.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So a couple quick things. As I informed the community in my letter, I just wanted to review those things. So we did announce start time since our last our meeting. We did have to adjust them to allow for cleaning between bus runs to make sure that the buses are as safe as they can be. So the start times are 7:15 for high school, 8 o'clock for middle schools, and 8:45 for elementary school. We also gave the district an initial cohort assignment of A to L for cohort A and M to Z for cohort B. I want to make it very clear to everybody, this is a starting place for the conversation. We know that even if we were indifferent to how families feel about these things, and we are not, we would still have to move people around, because even though that's a really nice way to split up the district, in schools at specific grade levels, there are classrooms where we didn't, it didn't work out that the alphabet cuts that neatly. So there are distortions that have to be balanced, and we're going to wait, because we have to move people around anyways, as we call families and get the preferences based on all kinds of different factors. And, we're not in the business of judging what people need. People just need to relay to the people calling what it is that they want us to consider. And when we move all the kids around based on that, we'll then see if that didn't magically fix all those balancing issues. We're pretty sure that in at least some places, it'll actually have made things worse rather than better. And so then we'll have to ask some families to move. So that's one of the reasons why we're asking people if it really matters to them which day they are. And, some people very flexibly saying, no, it doesn't really matter. And then the people who have concerns are letting us know. So there's a lot to go before we get at the final cohort assignment. But we thought it was important to put something out there so parents could at least react to that. And so if they say, that's perfect, I need that, don't change it, we're taking that down. If they're saying, it doesn't really matter, we're taking that down. If they say, no, this is what I need. And sometimes it's a specific day because of their schedule. Other times it's because they want to coordinate with specific families to coordinate care. And so there's a lot of things that go into it. And we're really going to try to honor all of that. Which, leaves the other thing is that those calls started today. All of our schools were reaching out. I know several people who received their calls. That's going to be a long, tedious process. And I just would really encourage families to, be looking for that call. I remember growing up as a kid, the phone would ring and everyone would run to answer the phone first. Those days are long over, right? Like, the phone rings and nobody wants to pick it up because, 9 out of 10 times it's a telemarketer, right? So you got this strange number calling homes. Not surprisingly, not too many people are answering on the first call. So we're leaving a lot of messages, but people are really good at, not surprisingly, more often than not, what the experience today was that people would leave a message and the person would call right back, 30 seconds later. That's fine. We understand why that's happening. You don't have to pick up the phone for telemarketers in an attempt to get us. We will call you back. You should know that we're calling this week and be looking for that call and listening for your messages. And if some people have full mailboxes, you can't leave a message. So if you happen to be in that situation, if you haven't heard from us and you have a full mailbox, well, maybe it's because we couldn't leave you a message when we called. So we'll keep calling people multiple times. That's going to be a long, arduous process. And hopefully we'll have it all wrapped up by 26, which is the deadline. That's the other thing that I really needed to explain to people. We have to draw a line someplace so that we can get ready. We need to schedule our buildings. We need to make sure that everything's in place so that we can have a safe start to the school, right? If safety's, our most important thing, which of course it always is, it's a precondition you have to have. We need some time to take this information and plan for a start. And honestly, we should already be there, but for all the reasons that we all understand, we're not going to have things the way we want them. So we're asking families to understand that after the 26th, we're not entertaining requests to change things, right? Now, I'm not saying we never will entertain. We've already told people you can change what you choose, but that change is not going to come for a couple weeks after school starts, because when we get into school, that first week, maybe 2 weeks, however long it takes, is going to be completely focused on those protocols and training students and staff and making sure the buildings are operating in that way that is keeping everybody safe. And until we get to a place where we feel like, okay, we've got it, now we can focus on other things, we cannot entertain changes to what people choose. And I know that that's going to be difficult for some people because the numbers might change and people could legitimately have a change of opinion. I understand. I'm sorry. I respect the choice, but we're going to have to wait until we're ready. So after the 26th, we're not going to be entertaining anything until we get to a place so that we're ready.
Mr. Dominici?
So Dave, thank you for reiterating the deadline. That was one of my questions, and I'm sure everybody would have asked. So I'm glad that you got that out here today. I don't want to make an assumption, but I have a couple of questions. One being, if somebody doesn't get back to you by the 26th, and let's be honest, we probably have a lot of parents that'll be going right up to the deadline, just trying to figure it out and sort it through. But if you do not hear, is the, I hate to call it the default, but is the default, like, if we don't hear from you, the assumption is you're coming to school in the hybrid model based on the guidelines that we've set?
If you haven't told us otherwise, and we don't get in touch with you, we'll have you down as hybrid. That is absolutely true.
Okay. Which I would expect, because that's,
I think you raise a very good point. If Friday comes and goes and you have not connected, again, please, assume that we tried and we couldn't get through. Call the school Monday morning, right? Don't wait till Wednesday to figure that out. You should, if you haven't connected with the school by the end of this week, that should be the first thing on your list next Monday.
I appreciate that. You answered how I expected you to answer, but I think that's important for people to know. And then the other question I had is that there's a lot of folks that have reached out, and I think a lot of other communities might be doing hybrid a little differently, where cohort A and cohort B go on consecutive days, with the cleaning day. Now, you've explained last week the thinking behind having an early day in the week and a later day in the week for educational purposes. Has there been any consideration from like a health and safety aspect of potentially changing the hybrid to be like a Monday, Tuesday for one cohort and a Thursday, Friday for another?
So there's no consideration amongst the administration. As we explained, and I'm happy to do so again, unlike other districts that don't have the resources that we have, we're going to be able to do a deep cleaning on a nightly basis. We don't have to wait till Wednesday to clean. And so, as I've explained to many families who I've received this question multiple times as well, Tuesday morning is going to be as clean as Thursday morning would be. And so, because there's going to be no difference in how ready the room is from our perspective, the educational gain of not having 5 days, without any sort of in-person contact is well worth, that decision, that trade-off. Because Mr. Furtado assures us it's going to be sparkling clean every morning.
I'd appreciate that. I just figured this is a venue where a lot of these
So I
questions are
appreciate you
coming up.
reminding me to
Yeah.
take that up.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Dave. I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Storrs and Mr. Goodish?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, we were just talking about the cohorts with the Monday, Tuesday, and the Thursday, Friday. A lot of parents, I think they're really wondering what is going to happen on Wednesday. So my understanding, of course, is that the staff is going to be in the building. Is that correct?
So that's one of the things that we're still working out with the union.
Okay. I think that would probably be the assumption that the professionals will be doing their job at the school buildings. But as far as from the parent and student perspective, what should they expect on the Wednesday?
I'll let Ms. Regan take that.
We're still working out pretty much the nitty-gritty details, but the morning will be small group instruction, small group live instruction that'll be scheduled the elementary level and the middle school level. We're still working out details at the high school level, but there'll be some live instruction as well. And then the specialists will be offering some type of enrichment or live session too in music, art, physical education. And then also, excuse me, the afternoon will be giving teachers the opportunity to plan and to support each other with the asynchronous instruction that we're asking them to do on the remote days. So whether that be planning to find a specific video that matches the content that they're teaching that day, or giving students some type of project, collaborative project that they would do on the remote day that would give them that time to work together on that day.
Mr. Goodish?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sawyer, something I had mentioned to you early last week. Well, I think that with the big AVA versus hybrid choice that families have to make, their biggest concerns are the unknowns of both. And I know probably the most popular question Ms. Regan has gotten is, what is AVA going to look like in terms of AP, CTE, all of the above? Where are we at with finding a way to demonstrate to families what those two options are going to be, and so that they can make the more educated choice, hopefully in advance of the 26th, but absolutely by the 26th.
You can talk about it instructionally, and we can talk about the video.
All right, so instructionally, that's what we're working on right now, what an actual in-person day looks like in a hybrid model. So we're really making sure that the time that students are with teachers, they're getting the most direct instruction that they possibly can on that day. In the remote day, we're thinking about utilizing the current platforms that we have, something similar at the elementary level to like Lexia or ST Math. We're thinking about using those on the remote day, so that when the students are in class with the teacher, they have the opportunity to get that direct instruction. So I can provide more detail, but those are some of the things that we're working on right now. And then in the AVA model, there's opportunity for teachers to meet with students in the AVA for check-ins, but then there'll also be time on an as-needed basis for students in the AVA to meet with our educators. So the content that students will be learning in the AVA is directly aligned to the Massachusetts state standards. And although the content or the topic that's being studied in the classroom may not specifically match what's happening in the AVA, the curriculum is pretty much the same. It has to be. That's what we're guided to do as a public school in Massachusetts. And so as students are working through that with their family members at home and getting support from their educator, they'll be able to work at the pace that's appropriate for them and be able to continue through each module with support that they need from school and home.
Ms. Regan, just to follow up on that, because it's related to that, one of the, I think, narratives that's taken hold that bothers me is that the AVA is a substandard or going to be an inferior model of education. So I was just hoping you could speak to that, because the way I see it, it's not. It's parallel. It's not exactly the same, but it's on equal grounds, just different. And, I don't want people to be under the misconception that going to AVA is going to get, getting a lesser education.
As I had shared before, it's because we're a public school, we have to make sure that we're aligned to the Massachusetts standards. So all of the content that will be in the AVA is the same content that we access from the Massachusetts standards. So the students that'll be participating in those modules, they have been built around those standards. So maybe the video that students watch or the actual independent practice skills that students would do in the AVA may look different than what's happening in the class, but essentially they're still learning the same skills and practicing them just at their own pace at home in a remote setting.
Thank you. Mr. Dominici?
So, based upon my vote, obviously AVA was important to me and just something I'm sharing with folks. The learning management system that you have chosen, my best friend lives right outside the Richmond, Virginia area, and their county had about 60,000 students in it and used the same learning management system in the spring. And for what it's worth, extremely high marks for how the program works, how it coordinates, how it allows students to learn at their pace. So hopefully, I guess my question will be, will the AVA folks, when will they get to see an opportunity, even like a trailer of how the learning management system will work? Because I think once they see that, it might put a lot of folks' minds at ease, to that very point that Chairman Withers just made, that the quality of what will be offered in AVA is, I think will meet people's satisfaction.
Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Dominici. But I did want to share that we have been receiving a lot of questions over the past week, and I thank everyone for reaching out and asking all of their specific questions. And as a result, we did reach out to the actual company and ask them to provide us with a few new links and videos. And so we have updated our document, and it is posted on the website right now. So in the Attleboro Virtual Academy document that's posted on our website, there are 2 new links that are there where you can access and actually take a look at the program. And we are continually updating that document. So anytime we get the same question just from multiple people, what we'll do is we'll add that question to the document because we know that many other people have the same questions as well. So.
And my other question had to do, believe it or not, around CTE, questions that I had and questions that some other folks have had. I even had these concerns in a remote model. Some of the programs really need to be hands-on. It's going to be hard to do in a non-in-person environment. Was there any thought or consideration, understanding that the high school as a whole, you recommended hybrid, some of these programs may have larger spaces that might make it easier for folks to be in person. We had a tour of the welding facility, for example, and it's a pretty large space. Was any consideration, or could there be any consideration given to some of those programs where if you have the space, it might be possible for those students in the program to be maybe in the class a little more?
So we're working through exactly how we're handling CTE, and there are a lot of different wrinkles. Some of them have to do with personnel and our HR concerns. Others have to do with, the instructional concerns that you're talking about in terms of hybrid. But the good news is that they had a meeting this week, or last week, I should say, and they are committed to making sure that all of the students who are our Chapter 74 program students are going to have access to our Chapter 74 program. So it was an unresolved question at our last meeting, but we can definitively say now that students in the AVA will be able to stay in their programs and receive instruction from their teachers.
Thank you for answering that. And just my last follow-up again is just to confirm that any learning management system we would bring in, right, has to be aligned with the Mass curriculum standards.
Has to be.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Goodish?
I just wanted to go back. I think Mr. Furtado was going to speak to facilities changes. I think Mr. Sawyer threw it to him. I didn't want him to be left out. He looked eager to answer the questions.
Well, yeah, no, just to compliment Stories. I'm putting the video together as we discussed. We shot some of the footage Friday, some more this morning. We're going to do some editing on Wednesday, and we hope to have it up Thursday or Friday for parents to see this. It's a simple thing. It's just showing the classroom, spacing between desks, the spacing that the teachers have. It shows, signage, cafeterias where children will be eating and what the spacing is there. Paper towel dispensers, disinfectants, all of that is covered. There's a short piece on capital improvements to make the buildings ventilate better. Again, it's a very short piece, but just an overview of all those things.
So it's something that you expect will be ready by the end of this week.
Yes.
So folks will have 5 days or so to
look at it
before
and
deciding.
just, help them make their decision.
Awesome. Thank you. And would you mind just sharing that with us once it's available?
Of course.
Perfect.
Mr.
Thank you.
Storrs?
Thank you, Ms. Withers. Kind of a follow-up to Mr. Dominici's question about CTE. I mean, there's some CTE programs that, without the hands-on aspect of it, it's very limited. I mean, automotive, electrical, plumbing, and I can, childcare, I can keep going. Obviously, there's the instructional side of things, which can work remotely, but the hands-on is an important element as far as I see it when it comes to a lot of this, engineering and so on. In that regard, for those parents and students who choose to do the hybrid, are we going to be doing our best to schedule it where their remote learning will be the instructional, while the in-person day will be hands-on?
We're going to give the teachers the freedom to do what they think is the best for their students. But generally speaking, I think we should anticipate that the day that they're in person in that shop is going to be the day that, they're firing up the torches, for, in welding.
Right.
And the day that they're home is the day that they're going to be doing the instructional piece.
So, just like I know we talked again in more general terms last time, but especially with CTE, some of these programs, hybrid is by far the better option for learning. Doesn't mean it can't be done remotely, but that's a fair statement.
I think that it would be very hard to replicate in a full remote environment what can be done in a hybrid environment in, again, any of our programs, but certainly in CTE. You cannot, replicate that hands-on stuff when you don't have any access to it. But that said, I really want to commend our CTE teachers that they are committed to their students and they're going to do what they can as best they can. And, it's not going to be perfect. It's just not. But, it's better than nothing by a lot.
And that was the point I wanted to get across. Thank you.
Just one thing on that, Mr. Sawyer, and it may be beating a dead horse, but it's just because of all the questions I've gotten on this. When you said that, not being there in hybrid is better than, doing the AVA for CTE hands-on. That would go that being there in hybrid is better than a straight remote model across the board as well for CTE. It's, correct?
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Dominici?
So I had a couple of questions I had put aside if, we've opened up to Mr. Furtado. One of my questions, you kind of just touched on it a bit with the video. Are we still on track with getting the quality results for all the ventilation and HVAC?
The engineer's on site this week, so hopefully next week, but he hasn't given us a timeline as to when the study would be done. However, it's being done, the state published both the criteria for the study and a vendor list that have agreed to the process with the state. So it's essentially buying a service off a state contract. And he's on that list. So he's following the state protocols and guidelines for doing this report. And we don't expect it to take much longer than the next couple of weeks.
And I guess just to kind of follow up, right, when Rob asked if it'll be available, the video will be available, we can get those results when they're available as well, because thank you. I of course, I knew you would. I had a question about the high school. Obviously, we had 9 rooms severely damaged, and are any of those going to be available for the start of school?
Yeah, we hope. The problem isn't the restoration of the rooms. That's going very well. The rooms are sort of in a state to be formally repaired. We received a waiver from DCAM, which is an organization in the state, a state organization that oversees construction on public facilities from bidding practices. So we enlisted Consigli, who has been in the space and has detailed the approach, the materials, the timelines. You know, they need 10 days. So they're using many of the subcontractors that are on site already for the new high school. So that, you know, it's not going to take much. It's going to get done very quickly. However, there are still some insurance issues. We've had multiple investigators in the area trying to resolve some things. And until their work is done, we can't start. So we're just waiting for the go-ahead from the insurance company before doing the repair. And as long as it's 10 days out of when school starts, we're gonna be fine.
Okay, because I obviously 9 rooms, big chunk. Hybrid is, you know, probably helpful in that respect as opposed to in person, so that you can move things around. And I am very encouraged to hear Consigli is helping out. I think we probably all are if we see what's happening next door to the high school. And then I guess similar to that, Brennan and Wamsutta, probably more for Wamsutta. And Jim, I know we were talking about this earlier. How close, there may be some impacts at the start of school, but we don't anticipate any impacts to the actual in the classroom portion of you know, having students in on the hybrid model.
Yeah, we have, Brennan is almost, I would guess 80-85% done. The last thing that will get done on both buildings are the big round windows. The folks manufacturing that had a 6-month lead when we made the order, 6-week lead, I'm sorry, when we made the order a couple of weeks ago. So that's going to be probably being installed while school is in session, but shouldn't be disturbing anything. The roofing, which is really the issue in terms of noise and vibration, that sort of thing is like I said, 85% complete at Brennan. That crew, so there's been a small crew here doing work and the crew at Brennan doing work. As soon as they get it all done at Brennan, they're coming here. So it's going to be close. I unfortunately couldn't attend the meeting today, so I didn't get any update on the timelines, but I told Mr. Storrs I would be happy to find out what was reported out today and get back to you on what they see the timeline as right now.
I appreciate that, Mark, and I know that was, we've had a pretty good turnaround time with, you know, getting everything moving on the roofing project. So, you know, all things considered, looking at it from start to finish, I mean, you know, it's going to be pretty quick work for the life of a project.
Yeah.
The only other piece too, I guess, is just the floors at Hyman Fine and Hill Roberts. I couldn't remember if we were still starting those or.
Yeah, that was a ping pong, right? So
Yeah.
no, that those were put on hold.
Okay.
The municipal council is certainly very sympathetic to doing the work, but given the shutdown and the financial implications of that, they didn't release the funds prior to the end of the fiscal year. Wanted to see what the revenue for the city would be for FY20, and B, what the state support was going to be for FY21, which of course hasn't even happened yet. So they're still holding on to that just in case.
I just couldn't remember where that ended, because I knew that we needed that ultimately we needed the council, and I can appreciate, you know, the reasons behind maybe holding that off.
Right.
And
yeah.
just one less thing to worry about with some of our buildings, I guess, for now. Thank you. Those are the questions that I had related to the buildings.
Mr. Goodish?
Just as a follow-up, because to prevent anyone taking what you just said out of context, although subcontractors and Consigli may be doing the repair work in the high school, that was with the waiver from the state on the proper bidding process, and
Yes.
that money, those costs will all be coming from insurance funds from the damage, nothing from the high school project. that would change.
Yes, correct. The high school, I mean, the repair to the rooms in the current high school, yeah, will be funded by insurance, and the insurance company is required to give the okay before any work is done.
And just to follow up to Mr. Domenici's last question regarding the gym floors, have you gotten any indication from the council? Because I agree, it makes sense that they're pausing on the project. Have you gotten any indication that if it were different materials or anything like that, that they may be more willing to fund it, or are they just holding all capital improvements?
Yeah, I'm under the impression that they are pretty focused on hardwood because of its lifetime as a surface. So, they want to invest the money prudently in a way that is going to get the biggest return, and that's what they want to do. So I don't think there's any thought or consideration given to switching anything. I think it's just a very prudent move, given that they like us don't really know what the state of Massachusetts is going to do, and now won't until late fall, early winter. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a wait.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mr. Storrs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't believe I'm asking this question in August, middle of August, but can you give us an update on what you've heard or where we are regarding the overall budget for this school year?
Yeah, so for 21, the state opened up by saying they were going to go, July and possibly August under the 20 budget. Then they announced a program where they're doing the first quarter with 20 level funding plus an inflationary number added to it, which was pretty modest in our case. Going forward, if they applied that approach to the entire FY21 year, we would be just a little over 2 million short of what our expectation would be. I think the city, in terms of funds remaining from FY20, which are being rolled over this week, so we're in the middle of a big financial thing right now. But remember, we returned 1.2 million to the city. So being 2 million short, having returned 1.2 million, the gap isn't anything to be concerned with. I think the city is planned for and prepared to deal with that, if that is the condition through the end of the year. For the committee, certainly for me personally, and I'm sure from the city's perspective, FY22 is a really scary condition.
Do we know the timeline of when we would expect to hear if Q2 is going to be the same?
They didn't give any indication on that. So that, that's July, August, September. So that, theoretically on the hook for making a decision in October. I think they'd have a fairly solid understanding of where they landed revenue-wise for 20 to understand what they're going to be in for 21, but they didn't make any promises.
I mean, I'll just make the statement. I mean, I know that we're in a pandemic and this is unprecedented times, but to be in mid-August and to not truly know the funding that we're receiving from the state for the upcoming school year that starts in a couple weeks is just crazy to me. But thank you.
Well, yeah. Well, federally also, there's a lot of cities and towns and states looking for support for revenue shortfalls, and no guess on that one either.
Shannon, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this question is probably for Lori or Yvonne. Circling back to the hybrid model and children that have IEPs, if they choose the hybrid model and they have an IEP for certain services, do we know yet if those services are going to be handled remotely? Would they be going to the building, or is that still being fleshed out depending on that individual student's IEP?
Do you mean the students participating in the remote?
Students,
the AVA?
I'm sorry, yes, the AVA. I'm sorry, thank you.
Sure. So the majority of our students who have IEPs could participate in the ABA. So just to clarify for families, whether you are remote or in person, you are going to receive your IEP services. So if you were remote, the majority of those services would probably be in a remote, kind of what we did in the spring and over the summer. But there would be the opportunity, depending on the student's IEPs, where they could come in for services on a scheduled appointment day when their service was scheduled. So we would prioritize those for physical therapy, would probably be, if you decided you wanted to have remote AVA or remote, we would prioritize you for PT in person if you so chose, because that service is very difficult to provide in a remote setting. Then we would kind of, and that's in our plan, we would look at students who receive orientation and mobility services, vision services, individual counseling, those are pretty much the services that really need to be in person, and occupational therapy as well.
Okay.
So there would be those opportunities. But from our perspective, our special educators and our related service providers are going to have a caseload like just they normally would. Students, whether you are in a hybrid model or in a remote, you're attached to one of our schools, and you have a special educator who would have your case, and they would be developing a schedule for those services.
Great. And then if families have further questions, would this be something that would be best discussed with their building administration or with your department?
So the way that it's working is the families are going to receive, once we get kind of through this week, we'll have a better idea of who's chosen remote, who's going to come with us through hybrid. Our case managers will be reaching out to them after that shortly, give us a couple of weeks, because we actually have to provide and talk through families how services are going to be delivered, whether you're hybrid or remote. And then we will be providing families written notification of those services, a schedule, all of that after that discussion with them. So in addition to the school call next week, students who have IEPs will also be getting, within the next 2 to 3 weeks, a call from their case manager to talk through the services and what that will look like for that individual student.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, so continue.
I'll continue. I just had one final update for you this evening. Last week, we were told by the state to expect guidance this week, which we have not yet received, on sports and extracurriculars, which I know a lot of families are still eager to hear more about. As we said, we had originally been advised to warn school committees that potentially people who do remote will not have access to these things. And I know I wasn't the only one who heard that, because at the state level, there was quite an uproar right after that meeting, which was, I don't think, caused by our conversation. I think that conversation went on all across the Commonwealth. Since then, I do know that the state released an executive order about sports specifically, for not just schools, but for youth organizations and it's a bigger picture than that. So I know that the MIAA and DESE will have to adhere to that executive order, but we still have to hear from both the MIAA and DESE as to how we're going to have to conduct ourselves. And like everything else, we'll be doing what they tell us, and if they give us the discretion, then we can discuss amongst ourselves how we want to handle that. So I'm hopeful that we'll get that information this week so that we can communicate to families what they can expect and move on that issue.
I mean, one thing I would add to that is that the decision to go hybrid at all levels was made after a long meeting and a lot of discussion. The high school decision even more so. But the narrative, I think, that's taken hold on among some people who may not have liked the decision that was made was that the committee decided to go hybrid at the high school because of sports and extracurriculars. I don't think that's accurate. I think the concern that sports and extracurriculars might not be available certainly played a part in our consideration, but there were a lot of other factors that were considerations. There are a lot of other factors that led to some confusion with the first vote, such as we didn't consider in-person as a first option as we did at the other levels. There was discussion about whether or not we could do in-person at the high school and what that meant for hybrid. So there are a lot of other factors that went into that decision. So, the narrative that I think has taken hold in some corners that, decision was reversed for sports, I don't think is accurate. So that made me think of that to try and clear that up. Mr. Dominici?
So thank you for that clarification. And yeah, to that point, I think that the day after our meeting, the MIAA came out with what they currently knew. So I can't imagine it was, although we have great partners at AACS, and I can't imagine anybody who wouldn't tune in. It's the timing was just couldn't have been worse, I think, for us. But the outside or extracurricular activities are not simply limited to sports. As Mr. Storrs, when you originally brought the point up, you were talking about everything to do with after school. So we're still waiting on some guidance there as well, because I mean, you talk about things like band, or at the middle schools, we have the 2 to 3 days a week after school programs that are successful. And for me, for someone, whose children will be doing the academy, sometimes, like in small doses, those extracurricular activities are a good way to have a social emotional connection. I don't know how some of that stuff is going to work out yet for the things that we do here, but your guidance, you were basically saying there'll be some additional guidance coming down and decisions on the sports aspect of it. Is the other extracurricular after-school activities, is there going to be more leeway given or guidance by DESE that will guide each administration, or will you have a little more leeway as, our superintendent to make some of the calls on this?
Our hope is that DESE is going to provide guidance, as they have about some of these activities within the school day. So there is some pretty strong guidance around singing and playing instruments and PE. So we already have that guidance, but how they want us to handle it outside, especially considering that we do have students who are going to be going remote. They have not said, but they did tell us that we would hear this week. So I'm hopeful that we're going to hear from them on both issues. And if we don't, then I think unless there's a message about, wait one more week, which sometimes that happens. Sure. But if they go silent, if they just, go silent or give us something that doesn't really clarify, then, I think that gives us the freedom to do, what we want if they don't set a rule on it.
Thank you.
Mr. Goodish?
Just a quick point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this shows, this is a great example of the frustration that I have had, and I'm sure a lot of the administration has had with the state level. They set a deadline for us to make a determination on choosing a modality, but left a lot of stuff up in the air and set their own timelines for finalizing important information after that deadline had passed. So to echo a lot of the comments earlier in terms of thanking the administration for everything there as they navigate these moving targets. Also, thank you to our educators for being patient in the situation that the entire district is being put in. I think this is a great example of that the state has set deadlines and then thrown a bunch of moving targets up in the air for everyone to kind of navigate and kind of guess what's going to happen. So the best we can do is work with what we've got. So thank you guys for that.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues. I know some of the things that they had planned to talk about have already been covered, but we'll just go on down the line and see if there's anything left that they wanted to share with you.
Just a couple things. Transportation, you may be aware, fee-for-service ended on Friday. We had just shy of 900 students enrolled, but that number is normally 1,500-ish. So we won't be taking in-person applications, but we're allowing parents to continue to apply through email as they have been doing, or fax. We, as would be the case, we can't assure there'll be a seat, and certainly can't assure there'll be a seat prior to the start of school, given the restrictions on buses. But if we can accommodate people who have applied after the deadline, we will do that as quickly as we can. We are, our next move is to work on bus stops. We're going to try to create bus stops that promote a lack of gathering by multiple students. It's not door to door, but we're not going to have big crowds out there at a given bus stop. Facilities wise, I just wanted to again mention, we've invested something north of $800,000 in control and air handling equipment in all of our buildings across the district to comply with guidelines for COVID-19 since March. We just started a new project at Willett, which had been designed and built with a smaller than needed air handling system to increase the size and capacity of the air handlers in the building, and that will be done before school starts. We discovered about 12 burnt out motors on the old high school, the current high school, in the past week. So we're up there replacing those and expect the building to be fully operational at the start of school. And, we continue to outfit buildings with signage and plexiglass and all those kinds of things in preparation of opening on September 14th. Lastly, OIT has increased bandwidth at all of our 8 middle and elementary schools to accommodate virtual learning capabilities and reconfigured the networks within the buildings to maximize that ability as well. So we are now at 1 gig at all of our buildings, and that is what the building's infrastructure will support. So, if we had an opportunity to go to 2 gigs or 5 gigs, it wouldn't help because the switches are all limited to 1 gig and wouldn't take advantage of the increased bandwidth. So we're sort of maxed out and tuned it up to the max, and we're gonna see how that plays out once we put the load on it.
Ms. Johnson?
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So did I hear you correctly that we normally have about 1,500 kids and we're down to about 900? And do we expect that that's going to be the max seating? Did I hear that correctly? Or is it just 900 to have signed up so far?
No, we don't expect that to be the max.
Okay.
But again, we have to be very conscious of the restrictions.
Yeah.
We knew all along we were going to be able to provide bus service to students eligible for bus service. That was never a question.
Right.
It's just a question of how many fee-for-service students we can put on top of that.
Sure.
We feel pretty confident at the 900 number. Going beyond that, it's going to be difficult, but not impossible, depending on how the demographics lay out, as the superintendent suggested, when we do the cohort A, cohort B, and make adjustments for families. That's when we'll be able to add some folks who have applied after the deadline and get the buses. We're going to fill every bus to the maximum that we can.
So would it be fair to say that we're going to have potentially less students in general taking the bus and maybe more families doing drop-off this year? Or,
yes, that's certainly fair.
Okay, yeah. And with that being the case, and I know we'll probably have less than half the building on the days that they're here, is there an anticipation or anticipated increase in traffic flow? And if so, how is those logistics going to be addressed?
I think that's something the principals are working on right now. Both in terms, it's not just the traffic flow, but also
there's different entrances
the queuing
depending
of
on grade.
how they enter the building. It's easy now. It's not going to be so easy in December.
Right.
So that's all being worked on right now.
Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that's on the radar. So thank you.
Mr. Dominici?
Yeah, so Mark, I just a couple of questions triggered. Well, to piggyback off your share, and hopefully with the hybrid and the 50%, hopefully it reduces the amount of, because I worried about that too with the traffic, but if there's only half the students that are going to be in on any given day, maybe that's that keeps things relatively smooth in all the buildings. From an OIT perspective, are we still on target for the end of the month for the, well, what would be the 6th and 10th grade students' Chromebooks? They had the recall. We still in that ballpark to have those
Returned it, the
returned?
repaired units in 2 weeks, yep.
Okay, great.
Yes, we are.
And a question that I had asked, so I thought I'd bring it up, and thank you for reminding me. So if parents, paid for fee for service last year, and obviously there's a big chunk of time where we didn't use the fees, and, probably apply it to what was, for this year. But if a parent's opted for AVA, do we know yet how that works? Does it just carry over till the next time they get back in school, or?
Nope. No, because, we're certainly aware that a lot of families have had changes in financial circumstance, so we don't want to be adding to that harm if they need their money back. We haven't collected any fees for this year. So for families who participated last year and obviously lost service from March on, that was remarkably happened on the 120th day of the school year. So they're entitled to a third discount on the fees this year. So we're not going to start collecting fees from anybody until November anyway. Again, just because of the conditions, it just didn't make sense to have people queued up and dealing with, cash and all that kind of stuff. So we'll be collecting in November and taking discounts off of people who participated last year. If people participated last year and are not using the service this year, they're entitled to a refund. They simply need to contact the transportation office. They are required to fill out a W-9 to get the refund from the city. That's not our policy. That's a requirement for the city to make a payment to somebody. And they'll get 1/3 of their fees returned from last year.
Thanks, Mark. That was helpful.
Is that it, Mr. Furtado?
Certainly.
Thank you.
All right, moving on down the line.
So good evening, so last Wednesday, we participated, ACEPAC held a town hall for families. We had about 70 participants and just answered a lot of questions for them. Since then, I've also sent them some further information. And I know I used Remind for the first time, and I'm getting a lot of emails from families about they didn't get the message. The message, for the most part, was delivered to whatever the primary contact is in Aspen. I just asked families to check their email, however they've set up notifications, as well as their cell phone notifications, because I can see that it was delivered. They might just have certain restrictions on their email and their cell phone on how things get delivered from us, just so if they could check that. And then the only other communication that I really have for families as well as for the committee and is regarding the ELC and our families or future families who've applied to be a community peer. So due to the social distancing requirements, we are working really hard to have the ELC. We feel that it's really strongly that they need to be in person. The ELC staff has met with Katie and I and Diane over the summer to kind of talk through the logistics of that and to replicate the schedule as best we can as if we were in person normally. So we hope to run AM and PM sessions with some time in between to do cleaning. So the sessions are going to be shorter. With that said, we cannot have 15 students to maintain social distancing within those classrooms. So families, we actually have to meet our special ed requirements, but to do that, we have to cut back on the number of peers that we're able to have participating in our ELC sessions. So we're going to have to prioritize our peers. The ELC staff started to call today. The majority of our families would like to return. We're going to start with our peers who were with us last year. So if you have a student that's a returning peer, we're going to try really hard And we feel that we probably are going to accommodate you and be able to have you participate in one of our sessions. For siblings who were screened, so you are a sibling of a peer or of a student in the ELC, you've already were screened in the springtime, you might have an opportunity to participate. You would be the next group, and then we kind of work down. So for families who have never been in the ELC, if your child was not screened in the spring, I would just hope, we'll keep you on our list, but just be aware that you probably at this point will not have a spot in the ELC. We have about 42 spots for peers, and we would really like to honor our peers who were with us in the spring, and then our siblings of those peers is kind of the first group of students that we would be looking at. So just for ELC, you're going to get further information. I know Diane and Nancy did a lot of calls today. They'll continue that throughout the week and notify families of that. But we are getting calls from families who applied in January, were not screened, or were screened, have never been with us at the ELC before, and kind of what was the status of their application. So I just wanted to let families know, unfortunately, that's kind of where we are. We do feel strongly that preschool needs to be in person. If we were to honor this idea of 15 students, we would not be able to do in person. We'd have to use kind of a in-person remote model, which is not the most effective for our 3- and 4-year-olds at this time. So that's kind of where we are. I don't know if you have any questions for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Update from personnel perspective. Over the summer, we've had our staff working on hybrid schedule. We had Sunday, as of last Sunday, we had there were about 5 days, and then at the return of our clerical staff last week as well. So seemingly going well so far. As I mentioned the last time we were together, we did do a staff survey a few weeks ago to determine who would be coming back no matter what, and any concerns people had with a return to in-person learning. We had over 630 responses to that survey, which was a very good response rate. 420 of those were AEA members, roughly 120 were paraprofessional, and then the remainder were district-wide staff. And the vast majority of staff indicated that they would all be returning in an in-person, hybrid, or remote model. So what's happening currently is I am meeting with staff who have concerns and working through with them, what those concerns are and answering questions appropriately. Currently, we have hired 22 new teachers into the system. Those are basically for just positions that they're replacement positions, not new positions. Mr. Hill asked about substitutes the last time. We have over 100 active subs in the system, which we are going through to, again, similar to staff, who, are you willing to come back and sub this year, and making sure that those individuals are up to date with their paperwork. As far as positions being posted, we did post, as we do every year, for a pool of subs at each level. And then last week, we did post for general, elementary, middle, and high school 1-year assignments, so that we at least have a pool to start from should we need staff either for the academy or to replace staff that have chosen to either work in the academy or take a year off. And that's my update this evening. Any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Singer?
Steve, I have a question.
Sure, Mr. Hill.
Can you guys hear me okay? Because Jim told me it was a little loud last time.
They turned it down on you last time, so you're perfect.
All right, great. Just wanted to ask one question about nurses, as you were talking about. Will there be a need for, additional nurses? I'm just thinking about instances when students have to go to, is it called the safe room? When someone has COVID, and then if there is or someone is suspected of having COVID, and then that student, particularly, younger students, kindergarten, first grade, will they be, and the nurses with them, and then something else happens in the building? What would happen? And, do we need to, will there be a need for more medical based personnel?
As far as how Deb Ebert, our district health coordinator, is operationalizing the nursing offices, I don't have the specifics on that. I can tell you that we do have a posting for an additional nurse for the district. So she is working through that and determining the needs of the staff in the nurse's offices.
Yeah, Mr. Hill, I can add to that. We've reviewed all of the isolating rooms for students who are suspected of having COVID. We are outfitting those rooms in addition to, working on the air handling and exchange, outfitting those rooms specifically with air purifiers with UV lights in them to do our best to keep that environment clean. We are also putting in remote video capabilities. So in rooms where, it's not adjoined to the nurse's office, we will still have monitoring of the student in the room until, a parent or guardian came in and got them.
Okay, thank you. So it is possible though, like a nurse would, someone in a safe room might actually, or sorry, what do you call isolation room? The isolation room would be left alone regardless of their age.
Depends on what you mean by alone. Again, they'll be under, surveillance. The nurse is very proximate to the room. They're not just sitting in the room with the student.
Okay.
Any other questions?
That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Sawyer and the administration for that report. Moving on, in our agenda, the minutes from our last meeting are still being finalized given the number of votes that were taken. So we'll take those up at our next meeting and simply table them for now, which means next we have open forum. Is there anyone who would like to address the committee at open forum? I see our friends at AACS shaking their head no. So I will close open forum. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Dominici.
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer.
Yes.
Ms. Porto.
Yes.
Mr. Storrs.
Yes.
Mr. Larson.
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Geddes.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Hill.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.